In my field, the social sciences, it's often said every human needs two things: meaning and belonging. We need to make sense of the world in which we live, and we need to find security in our life. We need meaning and we need belonging. My love for Oxford grew during my 10 years there, starting off as a graduate student. My fascination in going there was to really think as to how people figure out the meaning of their lives and to understand how the modern world ticks and why people make the choices that they do. Well, Oxford University is rather like the Harvard of England. You have a kind of elite who come here with incredible ambitions, but you get people incredibly bright, incredibly successful, and they want to excel in sports and excel in business and excel in this, that, and the other. And the challenge is to get them to, wait, slow down a bit. It's only if you really understand the meaning of life that other things like success, careers, and so on really make any sense.
Have I mused about the general meaning of life? Not particularly. Just sort of every day, see how it goes.
I think it's more momentary than some kind of transition or some state. I think you can go through moments of enchantment with life and then out of them again. So yeah, I think you have to be satisfied, otherwise you spend your life in regret and guilt and no good in that. So yeah.
I'm just enjoying living at the moment and just sort of really pursuing studying something that I really enjoy, like to study, just you know, to the highest level. And I haven't really thought a massive amount about beyond that.
Yeah, I sort of believe in fate to the extent where these things will normally sort themselves out. If I just live every day as if, I don't know, live every day that's my last, enjoy every day as it comes, then the general pattern seems to normally sort itself out.
I try not to think of things with too much kind of clarity, because then you set yourself up for failure, I think. So I think just to find new relationships and different ways of loving things and people and life and kind of adventure, I guess, intellectual adventure and actual adventure, and yeah, continue to be inspired and enchanted, I think, by the things you come across.
I'm just I've been sort of almost funneled towards going to university, doing school, going to university, a little bit of the standard. That's not really an end in and of itself, but I think, it's just giving yourself the opportunity to, raise a happy family, to be honest.
Oxford is one of the world's oldest universities, and is set in a town that is called the City of the Dreaming Spires. The university isn't one single campus. It's a collection of nearly 38 separate colleges that combine to form the university. Some of them go back to the 12th century. The whole environment here is stimulating. It's even been said that if you take a deep breath here, your IQ will go up by 10 points. Open since the 1600s, the Bodley Library is the university's main research center, with more than 11 million items. Scenes from the Harry Potter films were shot here, and many other films too. It's a perfect place to ask questions, and it's a perfect place for searching minds. I often describe myself, and others describe me, as an author and a social critic. My technical discipline is sociology, and that's what my doctorate's in, but I'm much more interested in wider things than that. Now, if you think, the notion of the journey is the most nearly universal picture of human life. And many of the great books and the literature of the Western world capture that perfectly. And they all capture the sense we never more understand ourselves than we really see ourselves as on a journey. Because if you think, here we all are. We didn't choose the day we were born. We don't know the day we'll die. And we're somewhere between our birth and our death, give or take 70 years and 10. So here we are, challenged to make the most of this extraordinary journey of our life. Socrates, the great Greek philosopher, he once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. In other words, you need to think and care enough about life to make sense of it. But the simple fact is, most people don't think, they don't care, and so they just breeze through life unthinkingly in an extraordinary way. Now, why is that?
I actually have been amazed at how much life here encourages you not to think. But I really, I don't know whether it's just because I like to think about things really deeply, so then when other people don't engage with it, I'm like, come on! But it just really frustrates me that you can fill your life with so much stuff here that you never actually think about anything. And I've been here for nearly 2 years, and there have been terms where I've let myself get swept in, and it has, meaning has definitely faded away, because the meaning of my day has just been to get all these impossible things done. And I used to think a lot more about the meaning of my life and what I wanted to do with it when I was at school than here, because I was less busy. So yeah, busyness I think can act as almost like a bit of an anesthetic for thinking about the meaning in your life, because it distracts you.
I like to show people that if they go through the search for meaning, there are certain stages that they will encounter. Each stage is predictable, and each stage is very important. The first stage in a seeker's quest is a time for questions. Someone becomes a seeker, and what constitutes a seeker is the way that life, for whatever reason, suddenly becomes a question mark. In other words, they've always believed in what they've believed because they were brought up in it, tradition, convention, or whatever, and suddenly something breaks through into their lives and the whole of the life becomes a question mark, and they become seekers. We ask questions to look for big answers, and finally for the big answer in the light of which all the other questions are solved. Plato, the great Greek philosopher, calls this finding a raft in which you can sail through life. Aldous Huxley, the novelist, he called it carving a cave out from which you can shelter in the storms. Buddha calls it his way, the middle way, as he called it for Buddhism. Jesus, of course, called it the way too, but he said he was the way. But the seeker is someone for whom life has become a question, and they are now looking seriously for answers. Stage one of the journey towards meaning and faith is a time for questions. Stage two is a time for answers. Now, to say that sounds very simple and rather obviously logical, but it's an incredibly important stage. A person who has questions clearly looks for answers, but where? Some might look in art, but you can see modern art, with a capital A in particular, has no sense that it provides any deep answers. You look at paintings like Gauguin's What Went Whither, and you see that artists are not claiming to provide the meaning of life today. How about philosophy? You can see the greatest modern philosophers like Leszek Kolakowski would admit that after 3,000 years, philosophy has not answered a single question to its own final satisfaction. And while it's an immense value in helping us think clearly about the meaning of life, the words we use and so on, philosophy by itself does not give us the answers. What about science? Because especially with the new atheists, almost everything comes through the grid of science. But science only shows us the how, the processes of life. It can't answer the why questions. So you're looking at philosophies of life, you're looking at worldviews, you're looking at religions, whether they're transcendental or whether they're naturalistic, like, say, atheism and agnosticism. We're looking at these worldviews. But when we consider one of them to be adequate and eventually adopt one of them as true, we're not looking at it anymore, we're looking with it, we're looking through it. So our worldviews affect what we see, and they also affect what we don't see.
For me, it's all about God. So it's basically, I believe that every like moment of our life has been created so that we can be in relationship with God, and the world was created as an expression of God being like, well, I've got all this love and I want to have some more people to share it with, so that's why I've been created. So I take my meaning in life from the purpose that I was created for. So for me, that it's quite simple, and it's really difficult to pursue and keep reminding myself that that's my purpose, but the actual answer is quite simple as a theist. Well, as an atheist, I think people, really, and the impressions that you leave on other people, and kind of contributing to, I don't know, a fabric of humanity, I guess. But then I don't know whether I want to be looking for meaning. I don't know whether I should actually maybe just see what comes and kind of pursue life as a dream, and might all be dreaming, I don't know. But I think you can look at it too much. I think if I look at it too much, then I end up going down some kind of nihilism strand, so it's better to just plough on. And she's quite a deep thinker.
So when you get to the end and you're looking back, you'll hope that you will have had a journey of what type of meaningful experience?
As a question?
Yeah.
I hope I'll have stories to tell. That's it.
So this stage is very, very important. And the key test is what's called adequacy. In other words, looking at the different worldviews, do they really give an adequate answer to whatever the question is? You could think theoretically about all the big answers in life, from the origins of the universe to the prospects for the human race, reality, identity, dignity, morality. You could think of them all if you want. While there may be 1,001 answers in the room, for all practical purposes, there are 3 big families of faiths. And when I say families of faiths, I'm using the philosopher's word for faiths that have a family resemblance. They all look something the same because they go back to the same ultimate source of reality. Now, when you see it that way, the big 3 families of faiths are the Eastern, which includes Hinduism, Buddhism, and the New Age movement. Secularist families of faiths, atheists, agnostics, materialists, naturalists, and then the Abrahamic family of faiths, which would include Judaism, the Christian faith, and Islam. Now, the Eastern family of faiths all go back to an impersonal ground of being. So you can use the word God, and the Hindus had thousands of gods, but God with a small g, not a personal God, an impersonal ground of being. All is one, one is all. The secularist family of faiths all go back to chance, what Bertrand Russell calls a chance collocation of atoms. Chance. Chance plus time plus matter. And the Abrahamic family of faiths all go back to a personal, infinite God, an infinite personal God. And all the answers flow down differently depending on where they start. So the seeker looks at these with a question he or her has, and as it were, runs their question through the different possibilities. Now, one can't do that in a few minutes, and I'm being far too simplistic even to make a suggestion. But just take one notion, because as I go around, say, universities and so on, the 2 big questions I often pick up are, 1, human dignity, and 2, evil and suffering. Run those 2 questions through the 3 families, and you get dramatically, decisively different answers. And you can see, if you explore these things, that the differences make a difference. In other words, the sloppy thinking that says, well, they're all roughly one, and if we love each other, talk long enough, we'll all get down to some happy common core. Nonsense. There are profound differences between the three families of faiths, and the differences make a difference not only for individual believers, but for entire societies. But let me just take, and very simplistically, let me just take human dignity. What does the Eastern family say? Boiled down to two words, it says, forget it. Why? When we take ourselves seriously as individuals, we're caught in the world of Maya illusion. So desire leads to craving, leads to attachment, leads to us being bound to the wheel. And the problem in the East is not that you die, but that you're reborn. It's a matter of weary, fatalistic going round. Hindus say on average 35,000 times, and you can go down as well as up. The goal, of course, is to escape the wheel, to escape being reincarnated. But it's escaping individuality. Buddha, when he was enlightened, didn't say, I am enlightened. He said, it is liberated. He had achieved the not self. Buddha called his own son Rahula, ball and chain, fetters, because even family relationships hold you back from that surge for eventually nirvana, which is the great deathless lake of extinction. You don't find a high view of individual personal freedom in the East. How about the secularist family? Chance plus time plus matter. I used to know Bertrand Russell when I was a student. In the secularist family, coming from chance, there is no meaning in the universe. If we want meaning and personal fulfillment, we create it ourselves. It's do-it-yourself. Nietzsche says, you live to be able to say, thus I willed it. Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, who many people follow, she said, you got to so live to be able to say, and I meant it this way. Russell, he says, we are like the Greek giant Atlas, who carries his own world on his own shoulders. It's, in 3 words, do it yourself, which is wonderful if you're young enough, healthy enough, and especially wealthy enough. You have the illusion you can do it. Most people, that's impossible and incredibly bleak. How about the biblical family, especially Jews and Christians? Each of us has immense dignity and purpose and the capacity for fulfillment because we are made in the image of God. That, of course, underlies the whole human rights revolution. We're made in the image of God. So this incredible double dignity, be who you are, created in the image of God, but also for Jews and Christians, become whom you can become, because we're not only created by God, we're called by God, and He knows us better than we know ourselves, so we rise to be whom He knows, and we rise higher and go further than even if we set out to try and do it ourselves. Created uniquely, called uniquely, an incredible sense of individual personal dignity and the capacity for growth. But the challenge is, don't take my word for it. Seekers should read these things for themselves, whether Buddha or the atheists or whatever, and really come to their own conclusion. Does this answer give me adequacy in terms of the questions that I'm asking? That's stage 2. This is the famous divinity school in the Bodley Library in Oxford University. The universities came out of the Christian cathedral schools in the 12th century, although obviously they owe a lot to Plato's Academy. The first was Bologna, the second the Sorbonne in Paris, and Oxford was the third, the first in England. And what you can see here behind me is the way the room was set up for disputations or debates. And a student would present his thesis, and then the tutor would critique and challenge it. And so you really went deeper into knowledge. And the idea was to reach a consensus in truth. So this was very much a place for people who are searching for deeper answers and a solid understanding of truth. We move along to the third stage, which is a very critical one, a time for evidences. Now, sadly, this is the stage that many people miss out. They've got questions and maybe needs. Here's an answer, they believe. But the really key thing is to know why we can believe what we believe. It's the stage to look at truth. In other words, stage 2 raises the question of adequacy. Does this throw light on the problem I have? Stage 3 raises the question, yes, it throws light, yes, it's profoundly adequate, but is it true? Now, sadly, there are reasons people just skip that stage altogether today. But the main reason that's skipped today is that we're in a postmodern age. Now, that word covers a whole lot of things, a ragbag of ideas, but at the heart of postmodernism is an idea which has come down from Friedrich Nietzsche, that there is no such thing as truth. So what we call truth is really power. Everything is relative, depends where you're coming from and how you see it, and at the bottom of everything is power. So there is no truth. Put differently, our age is an age of great skepticism. Humans need trust, and underneath it, truth. You can think of all the simple things that assume and require truth. Relationships, or something like journalism. Why is a newspaper different from a rumor mill? Or take something high like the enterprise of science. Without knowing why what we believe fits the reality of the universe, science would just fade away and be irrelevant. Many of our grand human enterprises require truth, and certainly faith does too. Now, when people search for the meaning of life, there are two ways they can look at the truthfulness of truth claims. One way is to look at it in a big picture way. In other words, to see if there's a grand fit of the coherence of the claims to truth with everything we can see about the universe. The other way of examining truth is to look at it not in a big picture way, but a close-up, detailed way. And an example of that is C.S. Lewis, well known for his later books, The Chronicles of Narnia, but for 20 years he was a seeker after having been a very tough atheist. Lewis spent years teaching at Magdalen College, one of the largest and most beautiful in Oxford. One of the delightful features of Magdalen is Addison's Walk. And it was on Addison's Walk as he was strolling along with J.R.R. Tolkien, author of books such as The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, that Tolkien persuaded Lewis of the significance of creation and things like that. A key part of Lewis's search for truth was triggered by the suggestion of a colleague. He was at Magdalen College, and one of his fellow dons said to him, "Jack, why don't you read the Gospels and see what Jesus means?" He'd never really studied them, although he was a literary critic and historian. "He's a great ethical teacher," his fellow dons said. "You should look at his teaching." He did, and as he looked at it, he saw that the dons were wrong. On the one hand, there was extraordinary teaching in the Gospels. Jesus says, love your enemies, forgive without limit, all sorts of things that no other teacher in history has ever said. At the same time, this same ethical teacher makes claims which, if not true, would make him a megalomaniac or something worse. And Lewis formulates the various possibilities. Jesus could be a liar, but as he looks at it, that's not what the evidence shows. He could be a lunatic, on the order of someone who thinks he's Napoleon or a fried egg. But he looks at the evidence, and that's not what the evidence shows. Could be a legend, in other words, concocted by his followers. But Lewis was a literary critic, and he knows the Gospels are solidly reliable textually. This isn't the stuff of legend. Well, if he's not a liar, a lunatic, a legend, what is he? And Lewis is forced to the fourth possibility. Jesus, this great ethical teacher, is who he said he was, Lord and God become man. And when Lewis comes to that conclusion, he describes himself as the most dejected convert in England. Wasn't something he wanted, but he's forced to it by the evidence that he reads and examines. And his is an example of someone coming to faith through that close-up, detailed examination. We need to know that what we believe can be seen and understood to be solidly true. The fourth stage in the search for meaning is a time for commitments. In other words, a whole person comes to commit himself or herself to the logic of what it is they see, they believe as true. The mind, the heart, the will, the emotions, making a complete commitment as a person wholeheartedly. I remember once someone saying to me very soberly, I believe the Christian faith is true, but I'm damned if I'm going to bow to God, even at that stage. But this is the stage where it becomes real. And many a seeker has discovered they haven't so much found God as been found by God. Now, of course, that may be the end of the search for meaning, but it's not the end of the journey. Jesus comes into our lives and says, follow me. I am the way, the truth, the life. We can be convinced that he is the truth, but he is the way, and from then onwards we set out to follow him. So the journey towards faith ends, and we believe in him. But then the journey of following him continues, and the whole of the rest of life becomes a magnificent following of Jesus as the way.